now talk about leaving home. Like all young adults, eventually most youth with a disability would like to move away from home. In New Zealand, there are 4 main accommodation or living options available for a person with a disability. There is some regional variation to these supports. Residential care, supported living, choice and community living, and family governed models. We'll talk about them in more detail. Residential care. This is a 24/7 support funded by the Ministry of Health. The disabled person lives in a provider's community home. Residential care is for people aged over 16 years old. There are 2 categories. Community residential care intellectual disability. This requires a diagnosis of intellectual disability. And community residential care physical disability. Firstly, a needs assessment with the NASC or Needs Assessment Service Coordination Agency will determine the eligibility of the disabled person. Then the Ministry of Health approve the funding level required to support the person in residential care. Families are given a choice of providers wherever possible, and a provider is decided upon. There can be a wait list for residential care. This is partly because the provider will want to match the new disabled client into a house with compatible people. Also, in Auckland, current house pricing and availability means that residential providers are not increasing their stock of houses. Residential care has a focus on being in the community. Clients in this service participate in the community as much as practicable. The client in residential care will have an individual plan where their specific support needs are identified so that all staff are aware and goals can be worked on. Day-to-day support is provided to the client, including cooking, cleaning, assistance with personal cares, etc. Some residential providers also offer vocational day program services. Supported living involves a package of support to enable a disabled person to live semi-independently in the community. The minimum age to access this service is 17 years. A house is not generally provided. The disabled person and/or their family is responsible for accessing a house, either through private ownership or rental, or a community housing provider. In this type of living model, the disabled person may choose to live alone or live with others. Support is provided based on specific needs in order to enhance independence. This is not a 24/7 support. An assessment by the NASC is required to determine eligibility for this support, which is funded by the Ministry of Health. If eligible, families or the individual choose a provider. The NASC will provide you with a list of providers. A plan is written detailing how the support will be delivered by the provider. Goals are identified and desired outcomes identified. Then the plan must be approved by the NASC to supply the funding. Supported living is not a 24/7 support. It does not generally include personal cares or household management or rehabilitation or vocational services. Supported living is not intended to be a long-term support. Rather, it's aimed at building upon the skills that the disabled person already has, to enable them to eventually live semi-independently. We'll talk about choice and community living. This type of living model is part of the Ministry of Health's new model for supporting people with a disability. It's an alternative to residential care and designed for those with significant support needs. This model is part of a demonstration project in Auckland and the Waikato, so it's not widely available throughout New Zealand at this time. This living model provides significant choice and control to the client and family over how, when and where support is provided and the lifestyle that they lead. The NASC will first assess eligibility and then a referral is made to one of several Auckland Choice and Community Living providers. The provider helps organise the support staff and the type of support they deliver. The individual with a disability or their family are responsible for finding the accommodation. This may be through private ownership, rental, or via community housing providers. Suitable environments might include private flatting, a house including social housing, or a granny flat on the property, or sometimes even a basement flat. If you live in Auckland or Waikato, ask your local NASC about how this living model may support you, because this option is evolving over time. We will now talk about family-governed models. This living option is based on the principles of family governance, including families' role in knowing what's best for their loved one with a disability. There is much information on the internet about family governance. This option involves the highest level of choice and control by families over where, when, and how support is provided. Again, the family are responsible for sourcing the accommodation by either ownership, rental, or a community housing option. Then the day-to-day support that is required is brought in and funded via a combination of individualised funding and work and income supports, or income from the disabled person's employment if they're able. People may live alone or live with other people who may or may not have a disability. There is a high level of responsibility for parents and families for such things as employing staff, organising rosters and payroll, human resources or employment issues, and safety. However, given this model uses individualised funding, and this must be managed using a host agency, there is some level of assistance from the IF host agency, individualised funding host agency, for payroll and staff issues. Housing can be costly in Auckland, and because this option depends upon individualised funding and work and income supports, or employment income, it is important to create a budget and ensure that this can be met with the existing income. Some families find this option a significant time demand, but it does offer great flexibility and control by the person with a disability and their family members. There are 2 informative booklets explaining this option. Details are available here. Disability Connect wrote an extensive article on these 4 main living options in our December 2014 Networker magazine. Here is a link to the magazine on our website. So in closing, for people with a disability and their families, it is crucial to have information in order to make a fully informed choice. We hope we have achieved our aim to provide you with relevant information. It's important to remember that the disability sector in New Zealand is evolving and several changes are likely in the following years. The information we have presented is correct as at September 2016, but please remember to check websites referred to in this presentation or contact Disability Connect to ensure information is still correct, especially as time passes by. The Korean Community Wellness Society, Waitemata District Health Board and Disability Connect wish you and your loved one with a disability all the very best for the future. Thank you for watching these video clips.